Hey Swifties! Welcome to a brand new episode of Swiftie School, where together we walk Clownelia Street covering the latest news and Easter eggs from our fearless leader, Taylor Swift. I'm your host, Reagan Bailey, and it is enchanting to have you here. Now that we're out of the woods, let's get into today's episode.
It's another great day to be alive at the same time as Taylor Swift. Hey, hi, hello! So excited to be back clowning with all of you. Before we get into today's episode, per usual, this podcast is just an expression of my thoughts and opinions, and while I would absolutely love to be associated with Taylor Swift or Taylor Nation, I am not. Now, Dublin is down, and we've got Amsterdam, Zurich, and Milan coming in H-O-T, or should I say H-O-T-T-O-G-O. Where are my Chapel Roan girly pops? Because I can't be tamed. I truly am obsessed. Now, there's so much chatter about the 4th of July, and if you're in my broadcast channel on Instagram, you know that I've done some deep diving, if you will, on the tie between 4th of July and the Alice in Wonderland sort of theories. If you are not up to date, I'll give you the brief overview. Essentially, lots of people, specifically on Instagram, TikTok, are clowning about what has been going on with Alice in Wonderland. Now, this dates back 3 years. This dates back, honestly, to like the inception of Taylor's career. She did a performance in 2013, I believe it was the Grammys, where it was Alice in Wonderland themed. It was We Are Never Getting Back Together, and it was very like Mad Hatter-esque. She had bunnies, she had like checker print. It was a very weird, it wasn't really well received. Like if you look up a lot of the articles from the time, it was deemed like a very wacky performance. It looks similar, the outfit she wore with like a top hat and stuff, kind of similar to the Torture Poets Department outfits that she wears currently on the Eras Tour. But I digress. There's long-standing ties with Alice in Wonderland and Taylor's career. More recently, 3 years ago, when she did the infamous Jimmy Fallon interview, she says, "Can I hint to something 3 years in advance?" And in this same 5-minute interview, she says, "We're all mad here, and can we go down a rabbit hole?" Which we know are both direct references to Alice in Wonderland. Now, present day, bringing you present day, obviously we have the song Wonderland from 1989, and there's a lot of thoughts that perhaps 1989, we need to go back to Wonderland in order to bridge us to Karma. And this is like very deep and niche if you're familiar with all of the Manwall talk. But to keep it more high level for you, recently, Travis, when he went to London, and so did Jason, they recorded their podcast in the UK. And they had this very random conversation on the podcast while drinking out of teapots and teacups, which I believe were like Alice in Wonderland themed teacups and teapots. While they're on the podcast, they have this random sidebar about Alice in Wonderland. And Jason's like, "Yeah, we watched the movie." And Travis is like, "Yeah, I always thought it was Allison in Wonderland." And I guess Jason was like, "Oh, like Taylor Allison Swift or something." And he's like, "Yeah, I thought it was Alice in Wonderland instead of Alice in Wonderland." So they have this random sidebar. And this just feels incredibly bizarre to me. So I started doing some research. And Alice in Wonderland Day is on July 4th, which is very interesting. If we want to take it a step further, the July 4th show is happening in Amsterdam. And there is an Alice in Wonderland themed hotel in Amsterdam. Taylor Swift was in the movie called Amsterdam, and her character dies in that movie. So you could say, like, the old Taylor couldn't come to the phone right now. Her reputation's dead, and she's going to bring it back to life in Amsterdam. I don't know. Look up 4th of July theories over on TikTok if you're on there, or on Instagram, because there's a lot of people that have really insightful and interesting 4th of July theories that have a lot of ties to Reputation specifically. So all that to say, if you're not up to speed with Alice in Wonderland, 4th of July situation, I guess we'll know. Time will tell, quite literally. And this is just another date to clown for. At this point, I'm pretty sure we're clowning for every single date on the entire calendar of the year, but that's fine. To live for the hope of it all. Reputation and debutation. Honestly, I'll take anything at this point, but I'm not going to lie. I am kind of ready for Reputation to come. Now, I know a lot of you guys have just joined the podcast. I have been posting the episodes over on YouTube if you don't watch them there currently and you tune into podcasting apps instead. And we have a lot of new friends over on YouTube tuning in. So I thought I would do a quick reintroduction of myself before we dive into what today's podcast is actually about, which is Stevie Nicks. And I'm super excited because while of course I grew up listening to Fleetwood Mac songs with my parents, I definitely don't know much about Stevie Nicks. So I had fun kind of pulling some of this information for you. And I thought it would be a great tie specifically with the shows that just happened in Dublin because Stevie Nicks was in attendance and Taylor sang her favorite song for Surprise Songs, which was You're on Your Own, Kid. And then she also paired it with, of course, Clara Bow, which, as we know, quite literally references Stevie Nicks. Now, a little bit about me, if you're just tuning in. First of all, oh, hi. My name's Reagan, and I started this podcast almost a year ago, which is bananas.com. And I'm so incredibly grateful to be in the position that I am. I have worked incredibly hard over the past 4 years building my career as a content creator. Now, a lot of people don't realize that while I am a full-time content creator, I also own a marketing agency. And I started that marketing agency in January of 2020. And simultaneously, I started posting on social media, not because I was trying to be an influencer. I don't think anybody should set out to be an influencer, but that's a story for a different day. I was seeking social media because I wanted to promote or market my marketing agency. And I quickly realized it felt like work after work, and it wasn't fun for me. And I don't really know where the shift happened exactly. I think it was just because of pure boredom due to the pandemic that I just started talking about random things. And I noticed that I got a lot more traction when I talked about things like my birthmark that I have on my face, or, I don't know, my tiny apartment that I was living in at the time. And from there, I've done a million and one pivots. And what I have found with social media is that I am exponentially more successful whenever I talk about things that bring me joy, when I am my most authentic self. These are all things that seem obvious, but it's incredibly difficult to execute on authenticity when you are trying to also make sure that your content's on trend, that you are, doing short form content that's going to be bite-sized and fast, and the clips are, only 2 seconds long, and there's a lot of moving parts. And so I feel like it's taken me 3-4 years to really master and hone in on just showing up as my truest, most authentic self. And I can honestly say that now I really honestly and truly just open up my phone and start talking and whatever, dancing, whatever it might be. And that has led me to talking about Taylor Swift. Now, I did not want to inundate my followers that are not Swifties, although most of them are, with Taylor Swift content. And I feel like I had a lot to say, and I wanted to take that off platform to a place where we could clown in a safe space, most importantly, but also clown in a long form version. So all that to say, no matter where you found me, I am so grateful that you're here. And I'm just really excited for all that's to be in store. And I truly, from the bottom of my heart, mean it. How lucky are we to be alive at the same time as Taylor Swift, to have such a fantastic role model? I was born in 1996, so I just turned 28 years old. And something to keep in mind with my generation, if you're not around the same age as me, is like we grew up with so many quote unquote role models that are terrible when you look back. The early 2000s was an awful time. There was no body positivity. It was all about being extremely skinny and thin. And, the Kardashians rose to fame during that time. And while I, have different thoughts on the Kardashians now, I just think like body image and things were so heavily pushed on my generation. And I'm so grateful that we have a role model like Taylor Swift, who has so much talent to bring to this world, is so gracious, so generous, and you guys know how fabulous she is. So I won't spend time talking about that. But speaking of another fantastic role model, I like to say this new phrase recently, because I get asked a lot about people like, Chappell Roan, Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, a lot of these younger pop stars rising to fame. And I like to say Taylor Swift walked so these new pop stars can run. And I feel like the person who walked so Taylor Swift could run was Stevie Nicks. And she's a really cool person. I'm super excited to talk about her. So let's go ahead and just dive right on in. Now, Stevie Nicks is really known, kind of similar to Taylor, for her resilience and her personal struggles, which has really informed a lot of her musical choices over the years, which is kind of ironic because I feel like that's exactly what Taylor's music is. And the cool thing about Stevie Nicks is she was both a part of the band Fleetwood Mac, but also a solo artist. So unlike Taylor, she has kind of had a different experience musically, but nonetheless, she is an iconic singer-songwriter. Now, she also has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Fleetwood Mac versus a solo artist. But all that to say, she's incredibly successful as a solo artist, and she has several hit albums and singles. And I guarantee if you were born in a time any younger than me and you're like, I'm not exactly sure if I know a Fleetwood Mac song or a Stevie Nicks song, I can guarantee you have heard their songs on Instagram and TikTok. Dreams is a good one to look up. Edge of 17 is a song by Stevie Nicks that I know you will know if you hear it, because these are just iconic songs that you probably grew up hearing in grocery stores or TV or commercials or something, and you didn't even know that they were Stevie Nicks or Fleetwood Mac. Now, when talking about Stevie Nicks' sort of musical style, I do feel like she has a very distinctive sort of, I don't know if husky is the right word. I'm going to go with husky voice. Is that strange to say? And sort of this like mystical, poetic style about her lyricism, which is interesting because I feel like so often huge stars that, people who have been inducted into the Hall of Fame, a lot of times they're recognized just on a larger scale. So it's always really fun, especially when we're talking about a female artist, and especially a female artist from the 60s, from the 70s, that has an emphasis on their poetic lyricism. I think now it's more common, especially with commentary on social media and how widespread music can be and music commentary can be, for lyrics to be studied. But I also feel, and perhaps this is a misconception because I wasn't born obviously or alive during this time, but I feel like music in like that time, a lot of it was very vibe focused, I feel. Am I totally wrong in saying that? If you were like a 60s, 70s, 80s baby, please write in and tell me if I'm wrong. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by saying that, but I think of like George Jones. Obviously, these people had a heavy emphasis on lyrics. I think what I'm trying to get at is that women weren't celebrated the same way they are today in music. Is that more fair? I think that's more of what I had in my head, and that's a better way to put it. Now, she really was considered a pioneer of her time, similar to Taylor in the 1970s and 1980s, but more specifically, not necessarily in the pop scene, but more in the rock music genre. Like I said about her sort of lyricism and songwriting, she was really known for sort of introspective and emotive songwriting, which again, of course, can relate to Taylor. Now, by the way, I'm going to walk you through a little bit about Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac, and then we're going to talk about the relationship between the two. But I really wanted to give you a good foundation, especially if you have no idea who she is, or maybe you are a fan, but you didn't know much about her. I'm just going to give you a little overview. So to continue that, aside from her musical style and genre and taste, more of a personal note is that she is really recognized for sort of her fashion choices. They do lean very bohemian. Think like a lot of flowiness, bell sleeves, loose crochet-esque vibes. She's really stylish, honestly, and I still feel like she's really stylish. I saw a video of her recently when she was thanking Taylor for writing the You're on Your Own Kid song, and I'm like, this woman still looks so glamorous at her golden age, and I love that for her. Now, Stevie Nicks has collaborated with various artists over her career, and those collaborations span outside of sort of that rock genre that I was talking about and span across several different genres. But her music truly, I feel, had a continual influence on several generations of musicians and artists to come. And I think it speaks volumes. I mean, just listen to a few of their songs. I think they kind of speak for themselves when it comes to both her individual work and her work with Fleetwood Mac. So let's go ahead and transition to Fleetwood Mac and talk about this band, because I think it's interesting. We've seen people like Harry Styles, for example, break away from a successful band and have a successful solo career, but I definitely think that this is quite the feat if you are up to the challenge of leaving a band and try making a name for yourself. Another person that comes to mind is Justin Timberlake, who's been able to do this, but I feel like I rarely hear of females breaking away from the band and doing it for themselves. So Fleetwood Mac was formed in London. Here we are again, back in London. We're back in London, and it was formed in 1967 by a male guitarist named Peter Green. So I was curious about the actual name Fleetwood Mac. I didn't know if this was a place in London. I didn't know what this meant, if it was like some sort of translation of something. So I did a little research, and the original band member that I mentioned, Peter Green, who is the guitarist, he actually named Fleetwood Mac as a combination of the surnames of two of the other members of the band at the time, which were Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. I hope I'm saying McVie right, McVie. So we've got Peter Green, Mick Fleetwood, and John McVie. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. We have one more additional member of the band, and that is Jeremy Spencer. Now, the band kind of goes through several lineup changes through their early years. And keep in mind, this is 1967, moving into sort of the mid to early 1970s. They really did start to achieve mainstream success around this time in the mid 1970s, especially when they added in two new band members, which is where we see the introduction of Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. So now at this time, the band has updated. We've got two new members, and this is sort of the lineup of the band. We've got Mick Fleetwood on the drums, John McVie on the bass, Christine McVie on the keyboards and vocals, Lindsey Buckingham on the guitar and vocals, and Stevie Nicks on vocals. Now, they released their now very, very, very iconic album titled Rumours, which became one of the best-selling albums of literally all time. Please go to Spotify. You will know these songs, I guarantee it, and you probably didn't even realize that this was the album or this was the band if you're like not up to date with Fleetwood Mac lore, if you will. Now, they initially kind of categorized themselves as a blue rock band, but they definitely did evolve into incorporating more sort of pop rock elements and soft rock elements. So again, kind of staying in that world, but sort of dabbling and crossing over between blues, pop, and sort of soft rock. They have so many hits that they're known for, some of them including Go Your Own Way, which I can't even say out loud without singing it because my dad loves that song. You can go your own way. I've probably listened to that song 10 million times in my lifetime. We also have Dreams, which I know was wildly TikTok popular, honestly, and Instagram real popular in like the past couple of years. And another really big song, Don't Stop. Now, a lot of these band members' personal relationships and dynamics played a very heavy influence on their music, which honestly is kind of a given. I feel like in all music, like obviously it's influenced by their life. But later in their career, after about 2 decades of success, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the year of 1998. Now, we know Taylor was born in the year of 1989. So again, they were already extremely and wildly successful at the point of Taylor's birth and continued to be successful through Taylor's early childhood. Now, speaking of Taylor, let's go ahead and talk about Stevie Nicks specifically and her relationship with Taylor and why she played a significant role in Taylor's influence really in her early music career. Stevie Nicks has been a long-time significant musical influence for Taylor, and we know this because she has quite literally mentioned this, but they also have appearances together dating back to 2010, and this specific public appearance is at the 2010 Grammys Awards, where they did a performance together. Now, it's really fun to go back and watch because Taylor has absolutely experienced some massive growth when it comes to her performance quality, but also her vocals themselves are incredibly improved. Obviously, 2010 was like 14 years ago, but really fun to go back and watch this. And I'll make sure to have linked for you guys of this performance in the show notes. I watched a couple interviews. It's kind of hard to find videos from 2010 on YouTube, but I did watch one brief clip of an interview Taylor did following her performance with Stevie Nicks at the 2010 Grammy Awards. And Taylor referenced Stevie Nicks as a new friend and sort of a guardian angel and mother-like figure in the industry. So this leads me to believe that obviously Taylor was most likely influenced and very familiar with Stevie Nicks prior to their meeting, but it seems like 2010 and the fact that she's referencing her as sort of a new industry friend is most likely around the time that they actually physically met leading up to their performance. So to give you a quick reminder or recap of that information, to current date, 2024, back to 2010, it seems like Stevie Nicks has physically been a part of Taylor's life for about 14 years. Now, both artists have publicly expressed admiration for each other's work, which is really cool for Taylor. Obviously, we know some of Taylor's musical inspirations and people that she really looks up to, but it's especially cool for someone like Stevie Nicks to recognize Taylor Swift publicly. I had mentioned earlier the most recent public admiration that Stevie Nicks has referenced was during the Midnight's era when she was on stage. She was grieving the loss of her longtime bandmate, and she mentioned that the song You're on Your Own, Kid was very relevant for her and a song that she was super grateful that Taylor wrote because it was helping her tremendously. Aside from Taylor mentioning that Stevie Nicks is an influence for her, She's also mentioned that Stevie Nicks' style and her way of writing lyrics has also influenced the way that Taylor approaches songwriting. So I think it's really cool. And I would suggest, if you have never dabbled in her songs before, to maybe listen. And I think it would be fun if you guys dropped below in the comments for me, if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube. Let me know if there's any songs that you feel like draw parallels really nicely, or in a perfect world, if we could decide surprise song set mashups, which two Taylor songs would mash up? Because I think that would be a really fun answer to explore, and perhaps I'll bring some of those up on the following episode. That's all I have for you in terms of all things Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac. I didn't want to bombard you with information, but I think it's really fun to sort of learn more about where Taylor's brain is at musically by looking at some of the most influential people before her. And like I said, Stevie Nicks really did walk so Taylor could run, and we love her for that. I also love that she attended the Dublin shows. I'm so incredibly happy for Taylor that she got to have one of her idols there. And on the same night, Travis surprised her, which is super duper duper cool. Now, before we transition into our Swiftie submissions for this week, I do want to do a couple of Patreon shoutouts. Now, if you're not familiar with my Patreon, what are you doing with your life? And if you're unfamiliar with Patreon, period, quick overview of my Patreon. It's a really fun place to continue the clowning. It's also a wonderful way to support me and support the podcast. I try to do my very best to make sure I am incredibly respectful of the brand that Taylor has represented. And so that is why I choose to not monetize this podcast. This is purely just a expression of my thoughts and opinions. And so a great way to support me is, of course, through things like my merch, but Patreon is a great way to do that. That is a place where I create things like free downloads on the first of the month. We have clown calls where we get on Google Meet. We've got all sorts of fun things that happen, early access to stuff. You guys weigh in on different theories. We have group chats where you guys can DM back and forth and talk with other like-minded Swifties. It's really a safe space and a super fun place. Think of it as like a Facebook page or a Facebook group, but it's all done exclusively through the Patreon app. And of course, if you enjoy the content that I put out here on all the podcasting platforms and on YouTube, I do a bonus episode every single month, sometimes piggybacking off of existing episodes. For example, I did a deep dive on Aaron Dessner for the last one. So if you're wanting even more clowning, head to patreon.com/Swiftie School, and that's patreon.com/Swiftie School. Now, on that topic, we have 4 new members that have joined since we last spoke, and those 4 new members are Ashley, Lucy, Tallulah, and Heather. Tallulah is like the most fun name ever. I was like having so much fun typing it, and I am having even more fun saying it. Tallulah. What a fun name. Now let's go ahead and pivot to our Swiftie submissions of the week. I am not going to lie, there were such an overwhelming number of Swiftie submissions. I don't know if like all of a sudden all of you realized that I had a Swiftie submissions form. A lot of you sent in a lot of theories, and I was hesitant to put a lot of them on the episode for this week, mostly because they were very number heavy, and I don't want to lose you guys when talking about numbers, and I kind of want to see what pans out before I dive a little bit too deep into numbers, especially if July 4th ends up being anything. So I thought this one from Mona was a fun one, and she said, "Hi, Reagan. So I want to talk to you about the 4th of July surprise songs. I think she will play Endgame, and maybe Ed Sheeran will be a guest performer because Endgame, their lyric is a lyric that says, when Ed is rapping/singing, after the storm, there was something born on the 4th of July. Done. Done, done. What a perfect full circle moment for this episode, because I was just telling you guys about 4th of July, Reputation, and sort of my thoughts as to maybe that being the next date that we're planning for. I apologize if you're tuning into this after the fact and we did not get Reputation, because Hong Kong beep beep, I'm moving to Clownelia Street permanently at this point. But I like this thought. I think a lot of people have been crossing their fingers for an Ed Sheeran appearance. I have no idea if he's in or around Amsterdam anytime soon, but would absolutely love to see these two do an Endgame moment, especially if it ties into a Reputation release announcement situation. Now, last one is a little bit lighthearted, but this is from Joy, and it's a good reminder that we have so many new Swifties as well. Joy said, "Hey, could you recommend a Taylor song at the end of each episode, because I never know what to listen to? Maybe one that's relevant to the episode." Well, obviously Endgame would be a good one to listen to, but the first that came to my mind is Right Where You Left Me, because I love to clown about this song. I think it's such a missed opportunity for this song to not have a music video. The imagery that I get when listening to this song of Taylor sitting in a restaurant, I see like the outline of a ghost or a spirit. I see longing. I think she could really ham it up acting wise. I think it could be sort of like a cabin, forest setting, not folklore vibes though, like more of a mountainy vibe and kind of like a sad little town. I just love that song. So I'm going to say my recommendation for you is Right Where You Left Me because help, I'm still at the restaurant, still sitting in the corner and haunt. Now, I hope that I'm not haunting you guys in your dreams with this 4th of July theory, and I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that something comes true. But until then, I will be sitting in a tree, DYING, to talk to you next. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Reagan. This was Swiftie School, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I know all too well how busy life can be, and I am so grateful that you chose to stay. Now just know this is me trying, and I would greatly appreciate if you took a minute to leave a review or maybe share this episode with a fellow Swiftie. Make sure you join my broadcast channel on Instagram for more Swiftivities, and long story short, this love is real, and I'm beyond grateful for your support. See you next time!